Hello and welcome to this Ask Me Anything live stream with anesthesiologist Dr. Alex Tripp. My name is Samantha Mellinger and I am the Director of Marketing and Partnerships for the Health Professional Student Association, which publishes the Student Doctor Network forums. Our mission is very simple. We help students from underserved communities increase their chances of admission to health professional school. And we do this by offering donor-supported guidance, advising, and assistance to students regardless of background or financial means. And we invite you to check out all of the many resources that we have available at studentdoctor.net. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started tonight. First, this live stream is being recorded, so you will be able to go back and rewatch it, or you can even forward it to a friend who wasn't able to attend tonight. Also, if you have a question that you would like to ask, please submit it in the comments section of YouTube or Facebook, whatever platform you're watching, and we'll pull it on the screen for Dr. Tripp to answer. Dr. Tripp is an anesthesiologist with a private practice in the Kansas City area. After struggling to decide on a career path, it showed during his tough application process. And after receiving one interview after 28 applications, he was accepted off the waitlist at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. He then went on to do his residency in anesthesiology at the University of Kansas Medical Center. We are so excited to have him here with us tonight to answer any of the questions that you have. But before we jump into questions, Dr. Tripp, why don't you share a little bit more about yourself and any initial thoughts that you would like to share with us tonight?
Awesome. Well, thank you. First off, thank you for having me. This is really cool. I appreciate the opportunity. So like Samantha said, I am an anesthesiologist. I'm in private practice in the Kansas City area, in a small independent group. I'm married, have a 4.5-year-old, just kind of cruising right at the moment. I'm a huge nerd, which is why I'm here streaming this basically. I used to do a whole lot of like pre-med and med student advising, and that really just sort of shot craps when I went to residency. And I'm really looking forward to getting back into it. I've done a couple of these live streams for like a few like Discord servers, smaller groups, but looking to kind of step that up a little bit. It's nice to be here.
Well, great. Well, let's start with our first question. Again, if you have questions for Dr. Tripp, please submit them in the comments section of Facebook or YouTube or whatever platform you're watching, and we will pull it on the screen for him to answer. But first, when did you decide to become a physician and why?
As I mentioned, I sort of had a bit of a difficult path to medicine. So I didn't really decide that I wanted to be a physician like until maybe a couple months before I applied. I was sort of torn between being a physicist, being, like a pharmacist, doing some sort of research, whether it's, biologic or pharmaceutical or who knows. And all of the science nerd things were on the table. And I was like, you know what? Medicine really fits me. I shadowed a few of my parents' friends who just like coincidentally happened to be anesthesiologists. I was like, I can do that. It seems like a pretty cool job. And so I just sort of set about figuring out what I needed to do to get into med school. And I was like, oh, I need to take the MCAT. I guess I'll do that. And so took the MCAT and did really well on it. And that's really kind of what carried me. But yeah, it wasn't and I would say even like up until I attended med school, I wasn't like 100% sure that that's what I wanted to do. But as for why I decided that I wanted to be a physician, this is an interesting question to start off with because I'm going to be super blunt with you about this. So income, right? You're like guaranteed a 6-figure income. That's obviously pretty nice perk. I like, the subject matter. Obviously, I like just learning how things work, whether it's in physics. I have a degree in physics, by the way, so that might make a little bit more sense. I just like knowing how stuff works. And what better to figure out than the human body? So I like that. Anesthesia in particular, I chose because I really like pharmacology. I like all of the medicines and sort of like the acuity of it. And not to wax poetic on that too much, but like it's really, really interesting to me. All of the like interactions and between drugs and medical conditions and all of that, I think is fascinating. And the fact that you have to like kind of know everything to be good at the job is not to say that I necessarily am all the time, but that's the goal at least. But the other thing is authority and like independence. I wanted a job where I could essentially function, without people messing with me, basically. Like, I don't mean to say that like I wanted, total autonomy and just like to, do whatever the hell I want. But like, it's nice to just be trusted to like do your job and not have somebody like totally breathing down your neck all the time and have like deadlines and, I have to keep track of what I need to do or else everything sort of falls apart, right? Especially in my situation, because we were, like I said, a small private group. And if somebody like sandbags, like the whole operation just comes to a grinding halt because we don't have enough people to make up for that. Yeah, there you go.
Thanks. That was great. So Ashley's got a great question. So what's the best way to find and ask physicians to shadow, in your opinion? Obviously, the pandemic has shifted a lot of that for students. And we know many students are struggling in that area, and you have to have shadowing hours to apply. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, so that is an awesome question. That's actually one that's a very common problem that a lot of students seem to be having. So, the best way is if you have a family friend or something who's a physician or like a friend of a friend or whatever, like somebody that you're connected to, that you could call in a favor from potentially. Otherwise, cold call. Man, I've had a couple of people cold call me, and like my personal opinion, and I know the opinion of most people I know, is if somebody's motivated enough to go out of their way to contact you, like that's a green light as far as I'm concerned. If you care enough to just give me call a stranger, call a physician you don't know and say, hey, can I shadow you? And be like, yeah, come on, man. I'll show you around. And, unfortunately with, the pandemic, that's kind of what you're reduced to, really, because so many places have, still have restrictions on like who can be in the clinics or in the hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know my hospital in particular just started letting volunteers back in like maybe 2 months ago. So it's tough, and you're going to have to use the batting average strategy basically, and just kind of shotgun apply, like call people. But yeah, I think like if you cold called private practices in particular, then you would be much more likely to be successful with that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another question about shadowing. So when you, let's see. Sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry about that. Is it possible to shadow when you're in high school?
It certainly is. In fact, the last person that shadowed me was in high school. It's unusual, I would say. There aren't a whole lot of people who meet the criteria that I mentioned earlier, like who are dedicated and motivated enough to, get involved in medicine at that stage. But I mean, I don't see why not. There may be, like, if you're not 18, there may be some, like hospital specific policies that will affect you. But usually all you have to do is get patient consent, just say, hey, I have this student with me. Is it okay if they observe? And I've never had anybody say no. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but I personally have never experienced that. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested, why not, man? Give it a shot. Go check it out. It's definitely going to be way different than anything you've ever experienced before.
Well, great. So earlier you talked a little bit about having a tough application cycle. A part of that being obviously deciding late in the game
Yeah.
that you wanted to even go to medical school. But were there any other factors that you think contributed to that you could share with students maybe walking through some similar situations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so a lot of it stems from me, from the late decision. But like basically education was the problem. Like I didn't really know what was expected of me. I didn't know like what deadlines, there were, like when you could start applying. Like for reference, I took my MCAT in May, late spring at some point. Um, and I just had no clue when the application season started. So I was just kind of like, yeah, I'll send some applications out. And, like I just knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about the process. If I had known in advance, like the GPA requirements, for instance, my GPA was really low. Low by med school standards. I think it was like a 3.2 or something. But if I had known that, I would have kind of gone out of my way to take some classes that I knew I could get A's in, and sort of artificially increase my GPA, which don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Like, I mean, that's not the best thing to do for your education, but if you have the goal of going to med school and your GPA is suffering, then you do what you got to do. But if I had known that, I would have changed that. I would have changed how I, wrote all of my essays, like all my secondary essays and my personal statement and things like that. So yeah, it was really sort of just like a haphazard kind of approach, to be honest with you, and it just happened to work out. So I'm thankful for that. But yeah, all of you guys on Student Doctor Network are way, way ahead of where I was. You guys know not to do the things that I have done, and you'll be much better for it.
Well, great. So based on what you experienced, what is some advice you would have for students so that they don't go through those same struggles?
Well, it certainly helps if you can decide, like if you narrow it down to medicine in your, first or second year of college or something, that makes life way easier because you can sort of plan accordingly, and, not get a physics major that you're not going to use, for instance. But yeah, again, just being on Student Doctor Network, which I did not find until like well into my application season. I didn't know about it until like a couple months after I'd actually applied. And I was just sort of like polishing a turd at that point. But anyway, yeah, like just knowing about this website is a huge, huge step towards avoiding those pitfalls. You have to do a bunch of reading to figure out like exactly what is going to be required of you for specific schools. And like, there's all the differences in like certain schools value research, certain schools like want you to tell them that, you want to go into primary care and all of that stuff. And, they value different, like volunteer or work experiences differently. And, you have to play the game to a certain extent. And again, being on SDN, like that's your resource for all of that information. So, if you think that you want to go to med school, just act like you're going to, because all of the things that you need to do to get into med school are going to set you up really well for any other career that you decide, like having a really good GPA, having relevant experience, having good like life experiences. All of those things are very important to any job that you're going to get. Right. So like, okay, you decide last minute, you don't want to go to med school. Fine. So you get out with a 3.8 GPA and, biology, some science or whatever you choose, and you're good to go. You can go to grad school, you can go into the field, get corporate jobs, whatever you want to do. So yeah, just behave like you're going to do it. If that's something you're interested in, just fire away is my advice.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way of thinking about it. So switching gears back to shadowing, we've got another question about that. So what is it like to shadow a physician?
Okay, so I'll answer that in terms of what it's like to shadow me and what it was like for me shadowing, because that's really all I have experience with. So for me, shadowing was very like informal and just kind of like, I I don't know what a good word for it was. I mean, basically, like I mentioned, these were family friends. I only shadowed family friends, and they're like, my parents' high school friends. So they like all party together, and like I'd known them like my entire life. So I showed up, and they're like, "Hey, Alex, what's going on? Let's go see this guy. He's got a huge chest tube. It's gonna be awesome. We'll go check it out." So it's very casual, and they were more than willing to answer questions like personal questions, even like, what's your income, like what can I expect to make if I go into this career. I would not suggest being quite that blunt with people that you that you shadow, unless you're in the same situation. You've known these people for 15 plus years, and they've seen you go from diapers to driving. But so what it's like to shadow me, I try to get people as involved as possible. So obviously there's some rules about how involved a shadowing student could get, because you clearly don't have privileges at the hospital. So you can kind of be all up in it, but you can't actually do any procedures. But for reference, the last guy that shadowed me, who I mentioned was a high school student, just coincidentally, we had a redo heart surgery, which is a really big deal, especially at a small, kind of medium-ish community hospital like I have. And he was like, I thought he was going to pass out. I was like, man, if you feel faint, you just sit. Don't go anywhere. Just sit down, man. But yeah, I had him all up in there. I was showing him, how you place central lines, and explaining why the heart surgery is a big deal. Well, I was like, hey, they might actually saw through this guy's heart when they open his chest. It's kind of terrifying, but if somebody's going to bother again to contact me, I want them to have a useful experience. I treat everybody as they're an adult learner. They're using their time to be with me, and I want them to have a good time and have an informative experience. I want them to show up and be like, well, I actually learned a lot about going into medicine today. So I try to throw them in the deep end as much as possible. I really don't know if other doctors do that. Some do. I know one or two of my partners do that. But as for anyone else, I couldn't say. But I would say when you shadow, push for that. Because if you're going to use your day, figure out what you're going to do. That's the whole point of shadowing. Is that you're not checking a box, on your application.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to make sure that this is something you want to do as a career. Because believe me, if you squander hundreds of thousands of dollars and 8 years of your 20s to do something that you freaking hate, that is a bad call. That's a really bad call. So, to make that decision as best you can beforehand. So yeah, advocate for yourself. Make sure that you get involved as much as possible.
So what surprised you most about your studies, whether that was undergraduate, preparing for med school, medical school studies?
Surprised me the most about my studies? That's a really good question. Wow. I think what surprised me about med school in particular is how much of what I learned that I actually use all the time. When you're in college, you have these classes and you just sort of have this gestalt that everything that you're learning is just 100% useless unless you're trying to win some sort of bar trivia night or something. Med school, we started off. So the curriculum at UAMS was organized by organ systems. So you'd learn all the anatomy, physiology, and pathology for one system at the same time. But the first 2 months were cell biology and biochemistry. And of those classes, I basically use nothing on a day-to-day basis, less than 1% easily. And if I run across something that was in those classes exclusively, I'm like, yeah, I'll just look that up because I don't remember any of it. But other than that, physiology, anatomy, neuroscience, all of that stuff, it comes into play constantly for me. Like there's very, very little that I don't like have to draw on all the time, which is awesome. Like at the time, it feels kind of crappy, when you're like learning all these like buzzwords and stuff to do well on tests. But in my actual practice, since anesthesia is so like kind of generalist, like that stuff comes up constantly, which makes me feel really good about that and time investment.
Yes. All right. Is CRNA taking over anesthesiology? Is that really happening?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not. That's not. So that's that's the big concern for medicine in general, right? Is like mid-levels essentially they Turk gerbs, right? So a lot of sort of like rural outlying places with like 1 or 2 ORs or something will employ CRNAs because it's just a cost efficient thing to do, and like they don't have people getting big surgeries. Usually it's like totally healthy to moderately unhealthy people having very small surgeries, and the acuity is very low, and they don't need somebody who's like an intensivist on the level of an anesthesiologist, and that's cool. Like why not do that? It's just cost effective. Like anybody who's going to need more thorough care than that gets shipped to the nearest trauma 2 hospital, or trauma 1, whatever, as appropriate. So I can't think of a way to say this without sounding like a real jerk, but like a CRNA can't do my job. It's the training differential is just huge. It's the sort of like trope is that CRNAs know what to do and doctors know what to do and why. I don't find that to be totally true, but I have definitely walked in on a few sort of tenuous situations where I'm like, oh my god, what are you doing? Like, please don't do that. Please let me fix this. And that's not to disparage CRNAs. Like I work with tons of really good CRNAs that I would absolutely trust with my care. No questions asked. But like they are not a replacement for a physician. And my experience is that a lot of these little outlying places that are kind of like near a city, like I can think of 2 places in particular that I've actually done locums at, and they choose to have an anesthesiologist there, despite the extra cost, because they've had questionable experiences with their hired locum CRNAs. Because so one thing I didn't mention is most of the time these places don't have full-time CRNAs. They use a locums agency to staff, or at least that's the case here. I don't know if that's universally true, but they just prefer that level of care, and to the tune of $300,000 extra dollars. So they vote with their cash, and like in hospitals, that it'll never change. With people who are just super sick and have tons of comorbidities and really complex medical conditions, you can't, in my opinion, get away from the care team model, or at the very least, like MD only case management. It's not safe. It's better patient care to have 2 people overseeing cases like that. So yeah, short answer is no. That's never going to happen.
Right. Have you ever worked with AAs or PAs?
Yeah, we have mostly AAs. Actually, we have 15 anesthetists, and I think only 2 of them are CRNAs. There's an AA school that rotates through our hospital, and so that's a very convenient way to get new staff. I have excellent experience with them. There's sort of a turf war between the AAs and the CRNAs, and I personally don't notice a functional difference. I think they're very, very good.
Great. So Amanda has been shadowing and have volunteer activity since high school, but is now in her late 20s. Should she only list those activities or list everything?
Oh, well, I mean, your life experiences don't have like a time limit on them, right? Like they don't stop being your life experiences because they happened 10 years ago. So yeah, absolutely. List everything that you've done. Like if you can discuss the things that you've done in a meaningful fashion, then why not? You know, if you're just going to say, yeah, I shadowed, and then somebody asks you about your shadowing, and you're like, meh, then obviously that's not going to do you any favors. But, if you're prepared to talk about it, and it was influential for you, then absolutely, yeah, put it down.
Mhm. So what's the bread and butter of anesthesiology?
Bread and butter. Well, my bread and butter is everybody else's bread and butter. So, like, whatever the various surgical subspecialties like to churn out, that's what we also like to churn out. So total joint replacements, hernia surgeries, gallbladders, epidurals, labor epidurals for OB patients. What else? Cystoscopies, all of that, all of the like basic fundamental kind of like quick outpatient surgery stuff. That's what we thrive on. GI procedures is another one. Yeah, because I mean without proceduralists, like we wouldn't have a job basically. Like we'd all just be like ICU doctors. So whatever floats their boat also floats ours.
Great. So this is a pretty specific question. But if gastro is what you want to do you think it's worth the school stress of med school and residency or just AA?
No. No, I don't. So I think, generally speaking, I think no. For me, I'm glad I did it. For all of the reasons that I kind of mentioned earlier regarding like why I wanted to be a physician. Like I want the authority, I want the, independence and like control over what I'm doing, etc. But, if you're just doing it because you think the subject matter is really cool, medicine is a freaking ridiculous opportunity cost, right? So I was actually talking about this on my stream maybe a month and a half ago when the Medscape physician, like average physician salary stuff came out from the what is it? I can't remember the national organization that like figures out what physician compensation is. Anyway, so in this area, at least AAs or CRNAs earn about 180 grand a year. And that's a 2.5-year program. AA school is 2.5-year master's program. So that's at least 5 years of opportunity cost. In my case, I came into college with like 40 something hours of credit. So I theoretically could have finished college in 2 years and gone to AA school. And so it would be 7 years of opportunity cost. So, 7 times 180,000 plus compound interest, from whatever you invest over those years is a lot of money. So, if you know that you want to do anesthesia and it's not really all that important to you to be like at the top of the food chain in terms of like, rank and authority, then yeah, go with AA for sure, man. It's a sweet deal, especially if you know that early on. It's a really, really good job.
Great. Do you feel like there is bias against older applicants for residency in anesthesiology?
No, I don't. That said, I have never been on a residency selection panel, so take that with a grain of salt. Anecdotally speaking, I had a 40-year-old guy in my residency class who actually happens to live like 2 blocks from me and be a really good friend of mine now. I did not notice that there was any bias against anyone for any reason, to be honest. I feel like my program in particular chose people who were going to be hard workers and were intelligent and would be a good, part of a team. I guess that probably happens. I guess there's some ageism somewhere, but I mean, 35 is not that old, man. Or at least I keep telling myself that.
Me as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think you're going to run into any problems with that. And if you're if you're already that far along, like, why not apply? Like, what
Mhm.
do you have to lose?
All right. What's your least favorite part of your work or specialty? And then what's your most favorite?
Oh, least favorite part? This is going to sound real sappy, but I actually really, really, really enjoy my job. I would say my least favorite part is the call volume. And part of that is like job specific, just because we are a small group. There's only there's 8 of us, but 7 who take call. So I'm on call Q7. And that sort of sucks. Like as I mentioned, I have a 4.5-year-old, and it's, it's kind of bummer to be away from him for a whole day every week. So like the unpredictability, I guess I'll be more general and just say the unpredictability of the schedule is very hard. Because I never know, like, so we do like a peel system where there's 5 of us who show up every day, because there's 8 people, 2 are on vacation and 1 person's post call. Whenever we just like stop needing somebody, they go home. And, that's potentially at like 7:30 in the morning, but it's also, for the first person to leave. And I have left as late as 5 p.m. as the first person to leave. So, I mean, that's very rare, but the point is, like, we don't have a schedule. You just show up to work and you work until the work's done. So, that kind of sucks with a family. But you get through it. And it's compensated with a whole crap load of time off, to be fair. So, it's give and take, but it's just kind of something you have to adjust to, and it's not ideal. And there are options. Like if you want to work at like a surgery center or like one of the small, rural hospitals or something, they don't have that sort of situation going on. Most favorite. I think most favorite is like when somebody's like life is in danger, you're the man. Like everybody looks to you, with certain maybe situational exceptions. But like if somebody's crashing on the table, like you're up. It is like massive adrenaline rush. Everybody in the room just like looks at anesthesia like, oh, what do we do? Oh God. And so you have to keep it together and like, organize everything. And I think that sort of like specialization is really cool. Nobody else wants to mess with somebody who's like actively dying, but you're the guy.
So, how did you know during medical school, and actually you mentioned this prior to medical school, you knew that you wanted to do anesthesiology. How did you know that was the right specialty?
So I knew that like anesthesia was something that I could like do, that I was interested in before med school. So I actually my first rotation was so for those of you who don't know, your 3rd and 4th year of med school. Well, if you're in a traditionally structured med school, your 3rd and 4th year of med school are your clinical years. So my first rotation of my 3rd year was surgery, and we had 3 months of surgery at Arkansas. And like I just sort of happened to be with surgical teams that were like, "Oh, you're interested in anesthesia? Yeah, get up there. Like you're not, you're going to be a human retractor for this case. So just like go up there and we'll like get you scrubbed in whenever we need you to hold stuff." So, so I got to do like a whole bunch of anesthesia, like intubating people, placing IVs and stuff like that. So I got very heavily involved in it early on in my clinical years. And I was like, this is awesome. This kicks ass. I can totally do this. I considered other things. Like I considered orthopedics, very briefly considered family medicine, with like maybe a sports medicine focus. But like anesthesia just checked all the boxes, man. Like it highlights all of the things that I'm interested in. The lifestyle's pretty good. And pretty flexible too. And I just really like it. I mean, I'm still a work to live kind of guy, but I do enjoy going to work. I like what I do. I like my work environment, and it's for all those reasons. Like the subject matter is cool. The pace of the work is cool. I'm a very like, I'm really good at like clustering tasks and getting things done. So I can like, I'll go and like bust my ass for an hour, and then I get like half an hour to just kind of cruise because I finished everything really efficiently and got to like release my brain for a second and then get back to it. So it's very like burst oriented.
Mhm. So, what would you advise someone who withdrew from a different health professional career to
Mhm.
apply to medical school to maximize their success of getting accepted?
Okay, well, I think you need to have a pretty good story set for why exactly you withdrew from that professional program. Um, because obviously you're going to get asked that. Like the one of the like key things for preparing for any interview, and med school acceptance is no exception. Like there's some questions that you absolutely know you're going to get asked, right? And like where are you from, why medicine, tell me about yourself, that kind of thing. Um, this is one of those questions. Like you will absolutely get asked this. So have a response prepared that makes you sound good. Basically, like like I decided that I wasn't ready for this for these reasons, but now I've reevaluated, and I think medicine is a better fit for these reasons. And I mean, yeah, just basically knock that out of the park and like do practice interviews. Because that's a potentially, like, if you don't answer that question well, that's a huge red flag, right? Like people will be like, "Ooh, well, are they going to drop out of my program?" So yeah, nail that. Do practice interviews, like talk to your friends, family. If you know anybody with interview experience, like talk to them and get a good response for that, for sure.
So, how do you explain the career of an anesthesiologist for someone who may not know, what that even is?
So that depends on their interest level. So if they're just like, what do it's like some party talk or something, and they're like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I basically put people to sleep, and I'm there when they go to sleep and when they wake up. And, if they try to die, then I try to fix that. And that's that. But if, you're like, in like this setting, if you're interested in, actually going into medicine, it would be sort of that, but in more depth. And basically would explain that, I'm the one who has to evaluate all of these people for their multiple comorbidities, and like how their surgery is going to affect those, if it will, how anesthesia will affect those comorbidities, and how they're going to recover post-op, and how their follow-up is going to be, and all of those sorts of things. Because the reality of it is, a lot of surgeons just kind of like sign people up for surgeries and, sort of leave it to other specialties to figure out if that's a good idea or not, especially in private practice. And, sometimes if they like recognize that those people are like total train wrecks, they'll come and like talk to you and be like, hey, this guy's a train wreck. But most of the time that doesn't happen. So you have to be on top of it. And like the easiest way to think about what I do is I'm the person who makes sure that everybody is safe. Comfort is sort of a secondary priority, but ultimately, like, anesthesiologists are the people in the hospital who keep you safe and save you from dying. So I think that's probably the best way I can think about putting it in a nutshell. But yeah.
Great. So, does the work-life balance allow you to be happy and pay you enough money for your time?
Mine in particular, yes, I would say so. So I was kind of talking briefly about my schedule earlier. So I'm on call a lot, but our calls are generally pretty like tame. I would say we get called like maybe once or twice overnight. Typically, there's always a chance that like everything goes to hell and you're up all night, but generally we're up for like one or two labor epidurals per night. Your day off, your post call day is like a true day off. So that's what, every 7 days. So that's like 52 extra days off per year. Plus I get 10 weeks of vacation. Pay is regional median for me, which is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, there are specialties that have better lifestyles and better pay, and there are certainly careers that have better lifestyles and better pay. Yeah, I mean, I'm rocking it, man. Like, I have a great house in an awesome neighborhood, and like plenty of time off, get to stay with my family a whole bunch, vacation. Yeah, it's good. I'm perfectly happy.
Great. Would you consider anesthesia part of the road residencies?
Well, isn't anesthesia the A? so yes,
Okay.
I guess I would. But yeah, it's as answered earlier. Yeah, it's a good lifestyle.
Are there any prejudice against osteopaths in anesthesiology?
Certainly not in my experience. So my practice in particular, let's see, there's one, two, I think three. Do we have three osteopaths? No, just two. We have two osteopaths, and one of them is a certifiable badass. He's the only one of us that's like cardiothoracic trained in anesthesia. He did a cardiothoracic fellowship at Texas. What is it? Texas Heart Institute, whatever the one giant heart place in Houston is. Yeah, he is freaking hardcore. That guy can resuscitate anything. So yeah, in my experience, not at all. No.
So what advice do you have specifically for underrepresented minorities in the application process?
For med school in particular, leverage your advantage, honestly. If you have some sort of like life experience related to your minority status that like influenced your decision to practice medicine, which in my experience, a lot of them do. A lot of the underrepresented minorities that I went to school with were, grew up in very poor communities in Arkansas, and wanted to go back home and like take care of those people. So if you can say anything even remotely close to that, truthfully, then 100% do it, because that is solid gold. Again, this is kind of a game that you have to play. I'm not saying lie, but you have to figure out the responses that they're looking for and that will help you. And that is awesome application fodder. If you can tell them that that's, your like minority status has influenced your decision to practice medicine in some way, then you are set. You are good to go.
So what tips would you give to be successful during residency?
Ooh, residency, man, these are awesome questions, by the way. You guys are really kind of nailing this. I like it. The ISO concentration in that room is 0.2 as I'm speaking. Oh man, hilarious. Okay, haven't been reading the comments, but apparently I should. What tips would you give to be successful during residency? So residency, in my experience, is way too unpredictable to like have a plan for. Basically just accept that you're going to get beaten down, and the earlier that you understand that, the better off you're going to be, and just kind of go with it. It's so hard, man. Residency is so hard in so many ways. You will just be like pushed to the brink physically and mentally all the time. And just do the best you can to like learn what you can from your cases. If you're going to be there anyway, like you're going to be in the hospital, try to get involved in some like high level stuff. Like if you go to the board runner and say, hey, I want to be in this cranie instead of, this anesthetist, they'll, generally be pretty sympathetic to that and, let you get that learning experience in. And I mean, you're not going to be like costing yourself any extra time because you're going to be there for 12 hours anyway. So screw it. You might as well like do something interesting. So get sleep, get as much sleep as you can, prioritize yourself as much as you can, because that's going to be super hard with like just the demands. It's like I feel like my residency was sort of on the light side of workload, and we averaged like upper 60s-ish, mid to upper 60s work hours per week. That's what I'm trying to say. So, and you're expected to study outside of that too. So that obviously kind of crunches your free time pretty substantially. Uh, but yeah, make sure you're well rested as much as possible. Make sure that you set aside some time for yourself so you don't go utterly insane. Um, whether that means time with your family or, your significant other or your kids or whatever. Just be aware that you are a person and you need to maintain that as much as possible.
What's been your most challenging case?
Oh God. Well, so my most challenging case was in residency, and the fact that I responded so quickly to that should tell you a lot about how challenging it was. So this was a patient who had like literally dozens of abdominal surgeries. I can't remember how many, but like 50 plus, and extremely unhealthy, as you might imagine. And she was having yet another abdominal surgery. To keep the very long, this ended up being like a 10-hour case. And to keep a very long story short, basically she ended up with no IV access, even though she had a port. We couldn't get any more. The surgeon ruptured her bowel in like 7 places. Like her intestines were just like this giant ball of scar tissue. And he just like totally blew up her bowels. And I mean, not through any fault of his own. Like she was just a disaster. And she started decompensating, and we couldn't resuscitate her because we had no IV access. And I was, of course, working with the most ball-busting, hardcore attending that my residency had to offer, and he was giving me shit the entire time, just like on me constantly. Yeah, so that fun experience mercifully ended at about 5 p.m. and I got to go home and then go to a journal club at his house immediately afterwards. Yeah, it was good. It was really fun.
Yeah. All right. So if someone wants to continue their entrepreneurship passion while being a doctor, is anesthesiology a good specialty for that because of maybe some of the work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable. So I personally actually own a business that does like Botox and IVs and stuff like that. Basically just like concierge, cosmetic recreational medicine, for lack of a better way to put it. So yes, from personal experience, I can tell you that this is a decent job to be in. And it also gives you a bunch of skills like that, like being able to give in people injections and IVs and stuff that are marketable. So yeah, good choice. Definitely good choice.
So in private practice, is the lack of support from a hospital in regards to staff and other things a big deal in anesthesia?
Not for me. So like I said, we are totally independent from the hospital. Like we just contract with the hospital. I would say that sort of the balance of how things go is like somebody says that they want something. Somebody goes and complains to like, the hospital board or like the administration or whatever. And they say, hey, we want this in the operating room or from anesthesia specifically. And then they come to us and they're like, hey, give these people this. And we're like, yeah, we can't necessarily do that. And so then, they sort of come on strong and then, we negotiate with them and stuff. So I wouldn't say that they don't support us. It's just a matter of like understanding, like there's like people who don't really understand what's going on in the operating room or trying to like call shots in the operating room, which is a bit frustrating sometimes. But, we have a relationship with the hospital that is such that we can make a phone call and like explain the ins and outs of those requests. And, it's basically okay. So the place where we have issues, because anesthesia staff are expensive, is when we need more staff. And it's kind of hard to go to a small hospital and say, hey, we need another $600,000 to hire 2 anesthetists. They don't like that very much, as most corporations wouldn't. But again, if we sit down and we're like, hey, like these are the numbers, we'll be able to give you this much throughput with these additional people. Like here's the the national work hours for anesthetists and stuff, and we're exceeding those, so we need to knock it down, blah blah blah. Like if you can support your argument with data, everything becomes a lot easier. But the short answer is no, not really a big deal. Like it's pretty much just standard negotiations. Nobody's like breathing down our necks for the most part.
So do DOs still face difficulties matching into their preferred residencies as opposed to their MD counterparts?
I don't think so. Not in this region, at least. Keep in mind that so the Midwest is where I have most of my experience, and whereas I applied for residency predominantly. So in my experience, no. Once you kind of get your scores out of the way and stuff, like everything's equal in terms of degree. But I get the impression that maybe some of the more elite schools, your East Coast and West Coast schools, maybe have some sort of prejudice still existing there. But yeah, again, in my experience, no.
Great. So this may be one of our last questions. So if anyone else has any last additional questions, this is your time to get them in, and we will try to get through as quickly as we can. But in your position now, knowing what you do now, what would you say to yourself back when you started medical school?
Oh, when I started med school. It's a great question. I would, well, when I first started med school, I would tell myself to not go to class, because it took me a while to figure that out. And I know that's questionable advice for those of you going into school shortly here, but in our case, all of our lectures were posted online. And I would tell myself all of the good resources to know, because I didn't really know those. I hadn't delved into SDN quite enough yet at that point. But yeah, I'd be like, here's USMLE World. You should do these questions, and do them a lot. So that, and don't go to class, saves yourself a lot of time. Read all the PowerPoints and all that stuff on your own. But yeah, I would basically give myself efficiency pointers on, how to improve quality of life.
All right. What's your advice for students that are interested in pursuing anesthesiology?
Well, it depends on where you are in your student career. Where are you in where you are in your education? The English is really hard, guys. Sorry. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, if you know super early on that you want to do anesthesia, being an AA or a CRNA is a really good option. I would personally choose AA just because it's less schooling. But if you want to be an anesthesiologist proper, basically the same, just sort of generic advice, get good grades, shadow an anesthesiologist, try to get as much out of those experiences as you can. Prepare yourself as much as possible for being on the spot, because like I was saying earlier, you're kind of on the ball when everything is going wrong, and you have to be prepared for that reality. But yeah, try to contact some anesthesiologists like me, and ask questions about specifics of the career and things like that. It's all about education, right? The more you can educate yourself about what you're going to do, the better off you're going to be.
Absolutely. So has your why medicine changed from back when you started to now being an attending?
The response to why medicine has changed. The actual why medicine has not. So I definitely did not mention any of the things about wanting to be independent and respected and things like that, just because of my profession, because that sounds really arrogant and jerky, but it's not a very proper interview response. But no, honestly, I like the fact that it's it's sort of you're just figuring out how the human body works, and you get to manipulate it essentially, with anesthesia, especially. You like to be, it's nice to be somebody who's trusted, to know what they're doing, and, to help people. as stupid as that sounds, like it's one of the things that I like the most is placing labor epidurals. I strongly prefer when it is not at 2 a.m, but that's one of the few things that we do when you show up and you make a difference in somebody's life. They're in like terrible pain, and then 10 minutes later, they're like, "Oh man, you are my best friend. This is freaking awesome." So it's really satisfying, to like have
Yes.
that skill.
All right. I think this will be our last question.
Okay.
Did your residency program give you a structured syllabus to follow so you could be up to date with what you were doing?
No, not at all. So my class was the first one. So I'll give you a little background information here. So historically, anesthesia has had 2 board exams. So one written exam that you did at the end of your residency, and an oral exam that you did like a year after the end of your residency. My class was the first one for which the written exam was split into 2, and the first part you did after the second year of your residency. And so my program was like, don't know what the hell's going on. Like, study as much as you can. We'll try to like get you some tutorial sessions in here, and we hope this is what you need. But like, no, is the short answer. We had no idea how that was going to go down. It was just a total cluster, basically. So yeah, pretty much all we had in regards to a syllabus was something that the ASA gave us. That was, or ABA, I guess, Board of Anesthesiologists gave us, that was like, well, we're generally going to be testing these questions, so I guess you should probably know this stuff. And yeah, we just kind of did the best we could. It was not super fun, but
Okay, last question for real this time.
okay.
So Amanda's asking,
Amanda's on fire tonight.
Yes, several shadowing opportunities in the past. Knows she wants to be a physician. So should she do some more current shadowing for the application process, or is historical shadowing good enough?
So if I recall correctly, you were the one who asked about shadowing in the distant past. So if that's the case, I would do some more to sort of refresh your perspective. I think that will be, maybe a minimal good for your application, but it will be more good for you. I guess if you've decided on medicine, it won't affect your decision in that regard, but it might affect like how you view the specialties. Like you might decide that you think clinical medicine sucks, or like medicine in a clinic sucks, or that it's awesome, that you want to like take care of people all the time, or you might decide that you want to do surgery or something like that. So basically it'll inform your decisions down the line. So yeah, I think you should get involved again. It's not going to hurt, right? Maybe it's a day out of your time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tripp, so much for your time tonight.
Of course.
And then thank you everyone else for attending this Ask Me Anything. If you did join us late, just a reminder, it will be available for viewing on YouTube. And again, we would just like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Tripp for taking this time to answer your questions. And lastly, we would like to remind you that we have many online tools and resources available at studentdoctor.net to help you on your journey to becoming a healthcare professional. So please check those out. Again, that's studentdoctor.net. And then our next webinar will actually be next Wednesday evening, July 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and will be a panel discussion about the pharmacy job market. So if that is something you are interested in as well, please join us for that. And again, thank you so much and have a great evening.
Could I interject real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry for to ruin your outro there, but
yep, you're good.
And you're welcome, everybody. I see a quick Alex do something. I'm doing something. So if you guys have any more questions that didn't get answered, I am actually live streaming right now on twitch.tv/milkmanl1. If you'd like to ask me a couple more questions, I will be around for a little while, and I'm happy to field those. So thanks everybody for showing up. I appreciate you coming out, and have a great night.
Thank you again.
Cheers.